DZOFILM sent us their new Arles Primes, and we wanted to test them in unique real-world situations. In this video, I'm going to test a standard interview setup as well as two stylized commercial-like shots. We tested these lenses primarily on the Sony FX3 as well as the Sony Venice. In addition, I wanted to compare them to DZO's other line of lenses, the Vespid Primes. Make sure you stick to the end to see how these lenses perform in real-life situations. DZO is known for making compact cinema glass, and now they are breaking into the market with this super speed lens at t1.4. They come in 25mm, 35, 50, 75, and 100, and today we're going to be looking at the 35 through 100mm. This makes a perfect lens set for various shooting needs in commercial and narrative work, and just as a good prime set for general video work. We're going to set up an interview scene, and we'll look at bokeh, lens flaring, and overall image quality, as well as what I think of these lenses. First off, we're going to start off with the 35mm lens, and you can notice the background blur as well as bokeh. It's smooth and pleasing, separating our subject nicely. This focal length provides a good balance between subject isolation and environmental context. Lens flaring on the 35 is controlled but not overly distracting, which is great for commercial and narrative work where you might have situations with strong lighting. You can see that it flares out the entire lens, but it gives you a sharp flare as well. It's not too distracting like some lenses might have. Next, we can go into the 50mm lens, and this is a classic focal length for interviews I use a lot in my work as well. Provides a natural perspective that is flattering for most subjects. The bokeh on the 50mm is not overpronounced, but you can see some distortion on the edges when we put it wide open. Generally, when you start stepping up in focal lengths, the lens flares start to change how it affects the image and how it washes out the image as well. And you can see that start to happen in the edge of the image, as well as just how the lens flare can be a little sharp at this point. We wanted to test these lenses in an ideal situation where I would use them. And this is typically in an interview setup with adding some characteristics that would add to what I would look for these lenses in commercial work. And this is bokeh performance as well as lens flaring. We shot this on the Sony FX3 and our base settings are at 800 ISO. And then we have a ND filter as well as shooting as 5600 Kelvin white balance. So a pretty standard neutral image. My first initial thoughts with these lenses at a super speed lens at t1.4 is that they are absolutely tack sharp. Lenses when you shoot at 1.4 are really associated with being very dreamy or unrealistic like. Generally, I like to stay on focal lengths that are below 35mm, but I would use this set for something that was more narrative because generally that's that watching feel. And later on in the video, we go over an actual typical interview setup and how I would use these lenses in that situation specifically. As we go up in the focal lengths, the image, as you can see, is very flattering towards the face. It's a nice fall off. The image is very pleasing and it's a very clean look. And then as we rotate the camera, there's not a lot of distortion. Obviously that's associated with longer focal lengths, but you can see the distortion and the cat's eye with the bokeh happening even more as we go up, especially at the edges. And then the flaring, you can see that it washes out the image a bit more, and the lens flaring is very pleasing to the eye and it's very subtle. A lot of lenses with their coatings, especially old school lenses, have very strong lens flares, but this is very clean and something I would really like to explore in my work specifically. And again, you can just see that how clean the image is here, how the lens flares even more and it washes out the image ever so slightly as we go to the edge. You can see right there, very beautiful flares and a very naturalistic look. In addition to these tests, I wanted to compare these lenses to something else in their line, and this is the DZO Vespid Primes, and we shot the 50mm at t2.1 as well as the Arles Prime at t2.1, and we didn't do any color correction here just to showcase what the lens looks like and the color it reproduces. You can see the Arles Prime has a very more naturalistic look, a very more creamier look, and there's a lot more fall off, while the DZO Vespid Prime is a little bit more crunchy. Another test I wanted to do was the 100mm FX3 compared to the 100mm on a Sony Venice to showcase how this compares to a cinema level camera. You can just see here why I love the Sony FX3 so much because it stacks up. And you can see that there's obviously some color difference, but these cameras really stack up to each other. And the FX3 is an amazing B camera to the Sony Venice, which I use on my commercial work all the time. And the last thing that we wanted to do is showcase how I would use these in an interview setup. We have the 35mm at 1.4 with the Sony FX3, and this is a very close-up intimate angle. And then we have our B camera, which is the Sony FX3 as well, at 75mm at t1.4, and these lenses absolutely perform beautifully. And I do see us using these in our commercial work as well as interview work like this when we're looking for a very cinematic image and a cinematic interview. So I really like these lenses. I'm super excited to use them, and I generally have amazing first impressions with them. And we've also shoot 2 scenes that we recreated from Euphoria, and we used the 100mm and the Sony FX3 to showcase how they would perform in low light situations. And these lenses perform amazingly. The main thing that I'm really impressed with is at t1.4, they're tack sharp, and that's what I like to compare to like a Zeiss Supreme Prime. I know it's not the same exact lensing and also cost option, but that's what it stacks up to in terms of having a clean commercial look. These lenses are very clean and just give you a very neutral image to work with.